What is up, Shark Nation? Welcome to another podcast here, live from Greystone Studios. My brother-in-law, as usual, out there in Glenageary. How you doing, Mark Baker?
Good, Luke. How are you?
Good. Our guest today on the podcast is John McGrane. How you doing, John?
Pretty good, thanks.
Good. So I was trying to do before we do these podcasts, I usually do a bit of background. I go on the LinkedIn. I try to maybe sum up a career in a few sentences. I've got a whole list of career items here for you, but I guess the reason why we're having a chat today, you're the co-founder and director general of the British and Irish Chamber of Commerce, and also the founder of Kmend. You've also worked in Ulster Bank for 40 years, so there's a wealth of experience there that we could dig into today. But hopefully a lot of the people out there will be listening will get something out of this chat, especially around the Brexit stuff, because it's so topical. So maybe we'll start with what you're doing right now with the British and Irish Chamber of Commerce. How did that come about? How long has that been going on, and what's the main driver of that business or that kind of setup?
Sure thing, Luke, and thanks for the opportunity to chat with you guys today. It's a really interesting time to be talking about business anyway, business in a Britain and Ireland context, business in a COVID context, and just business. And how I got to be involved was I was one of the co-founders of the British Irish Chamber of Commerce. So we're just coming up to our 10th anniversary. A lot of people think we've been around for 800 years of oppression and all that kind of stuff, but actually no. While we've had an American chamber, we've had European chambers, we've had Dublin Chamber, where I was on the board as vice president for a number of years. We've had lots of those things, but actually, while some of those go back, I mean, Dublin Chamber goes back 280 years. We're only 10 years in business as the British Irish Chamber, mostly because people kind of took for granted that we're so close, we're so interwoven in so many ways, including by trade, but also by lots of other things, culture, language, legislation, community, family, lots and lots of things. We actually didn't have a British Irish Chamber of Commerce ever up until 10 years ago when we made one. And it coincided with the visit to Ireland, a historical visit at the time in 2011 of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, reciprocated within a year afterwards by the historical visit of President Michael D. Higgins to Britain. And in the aura of all of that, a bunch of us in business, I was in banking at the time, but I'm okay now, decided to come together and form a Chamber of Commerce with the aim really of nothing to do with politics, but to recognize the fact that it was kind of odd that we didn't have an organization that could speak for and represent and promote the cause of businesses who do business between and from the two islands of Ireland and Great Britain. So we built it, and it did okay for a couple of years, but frankly, it didn't thrive. We had some great early support from some significant firms, but to become a growing organization, we needed to build a proper business model in behind that. So I was retiring 2 years later from my career in Ulster Bank, and the board asked me to have a look at reviving the chamber to take it, strongly into the next phase after that initial aura of the start had burned off. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. I'll go one step further. I'll run it for you on my own resources, and you pay me a fee every year to grow it. So I get an incentive to do the right thing for our members and make it the best thriving business organization they could be in. The chamber itself, through its board, gets to do well, and we get to make good things happen together for everybody involved. And that's been the story so far.
Brilliant. And just for those people out there that maybe haven't come across Chamber of Commerce's before, would you describe that as a business support group or networking group? How would you describe that type of business?
So we do two things. It's a really good question, because lots and lots of people think chambers of commerce are sort of footy-duddy old places and a bit sort of dusty and all that kind of stuff, or a bit mysterious. So we're very simple and straightforward. We do two things. We connect people together. So business A wants to meet business B, and we make that happen. Or we know of a business B that business B and C should get to meet, so we introduce them, and we know enough about them and learn enough and are interested enough in their affairs and their interests commercially to say, we saw somebody that we think would be good for you to know. So we make that happen. We do that across a bunch of different industrial sectors. So we're not all about Brexit or British-Irish relations, as a political cause, but we take that on a sectoral basis. We're founded on the energy and climate sector, with now sustainability. But we also have about a dozen other sectors ranging from the food and agribusiness sector, finance and professional services, infrastructure, life sciences, technology. We're the only business organisation which on day one formed a cultural wing, which we call CAST, which is Culture, Arts, Sports and Tourism, mostly because we recognise as people in business that actually culture is fundamental to people's human existence and to the quality of life for our people. But culture essentially gets paid for substantially by, if it isn't the taxpayer, all of us, the commercial bit is tourism, so the visitor economy. And equally, tourism depends greatly on the vibrancy of the cultural sector. So we built that, and we have a broad enterprise group and a couple of other sectors as well. So we do connecting across business sectors. And the second big component of what we do is public policy advocacy. So across all of those sectors, they have issues, most of them nothing to do with Brexit. So energy, lots and lots of EU competency is devolved to the island of Britain and the island of Ireland to work stuff out themselves. The water doesn't know where the border is. The electrons don't know where the border is. The wind doesn't know where the border is. So a lot of regulation between these islands is handled locally. And we do a lot of work in public policy with both governments, Britain and Ireland, to create the smoothest possible conditions for getting good business done. Obviously for power companies and utilities and the like of that, and generators and stuff, but mostly for the benefit of consumers as a result of taking out some of the friction costs that would arise if we didn't clean up some of the legislation. We do that across all of our sectors like food, life sciences, technology and such like. So we do public policy work. That includes Brexit, obviously, these days, and we do that networking piece better than anybody else.
Okay, so that's for all those people out there that wanted an overview. That was as in depth as you could get, which is great. And so with the I know you mentioned that Brexit is not all that you talk about. It's probably a lot of the questions you guys are getting right now, though, just because the time that's in it, and the kind of the deadlines that are coming up. What do you think that this is, like the outcome of this? Do you think this has been a disaster? Do you see that Irish businesses thriving after this, or is there going to be is it going to be a choppy? Are people not really appreciating what the outcomes could lead to for a SMB sector here?
Well, the answer is classically mixed, to be honest with you. Look, I mean, the deal around Brexit is essentially about parts of the economy that are greatly exposed to difference in regulation. So food, for instance, is particularly exposed in that area, and we can talk about that, versus other parts of economic life, which are so globalized that any local differences are unlikely to amount to much. I mean, people have heard about the World Trade Organization, the WTO. So the most exposed sector to a situation where Britain would be working to what's called WTO regulation as opposed to EU regulation. The effect of that would be to increase what we call tariffs and duties and quotas around the volume and taxes on the trade of foodstuffs between Ireland and Britain. That's the most extreme. And so, I mean, just to put a context around that, it's not some theoretical thing, it's very straightforward. Today, we sell the finest quality Irish beef to Britain, not just in big slabs of sides of cattle, but also in ready meals that are made in Monaghan and transported overnight through the Larnestrand Rare route, and they appear as if by magic on a Marks and Spencer shelf in the middle of Manchester at exactly 7 minutes past 8 tomorrow morning. That's a brilliantly sophisticated trade that gives British homes access to great Irish food, the highest quality at very good prices. Exporting beef in that context today goes into Britain without any taxes payable on the Britain side. So there are no import tariffs for Irish beef into Britain today. An environment in which tariffs do apply would see, under the World Trade Organization, beef carrying a tax of up to 72%. So that's nearly twice the price of the raw material. So as you can imagine, a beef stew made in Monaghan appearing in Marks and Spencer's after that becomes significantly poorer value for the British consumer. Ditto in other aspects of agriculture. So dairy products have a duty applicable to them of up to 52%. And Britain is Ireland's biggest customer for cheddar cheese. almost half of all the cheddar cheese made or consumed in Britain is Irish made. So the loss of that market for those types of foodstuffs has a huge impact, not just for the processors, but right back to the farm gate and the farm homesteads right across the highways and byways of Ireland. It's not just a farming thing, because farmers spend locally. They buy a local car, they get the car insured in a local insurance broker. The insurance broker sponsors the local hurling team. So everything about that trade has impact right down to the local football clubs and sports clubs and cultural establishments and religious establishments and everything else in the homesteads right across the highways and byways of Ireland. So if that's damaged, then life in Ireland is damaged. And it's just the same with other trades, obviously on the Britain side as well. They are worse off when that arises. But further back, there are other aspects of trade which have very little duty applied to them. So literally nuts and bolts. Metal components don't really have much duty applied to them because the WTO isn't much interested in that. But even for those that have no duties applied to them, the import and export documentation in a not free trade agreement that deletes those things, and that's not what we have in front of us right now. It means that the trade in fairly basic products, even without taxes, has a lot more documentation, what's called import declarations and export licenses and health and safety certificates. All that stuff that we don't have to do as EU members together becomes, frankly, a pain in the ass and an expensive waste of time and resources. And some jobs will be lost because the margins in those businesses will be worse off because of those extra costs. So is Brexit a good thing? Not really.
Not really. And what about something like a professional services business? So it's like, for instance, Mark Baker's business with recruiting. Say if he is doing work for a client in Manchester,
Sure thing.
does that affect those types of businesses in Ireland?
Yeah, it's a really important question, because here's the thing. While we've been talking for 4.5 years since the UK referendum to leave the EU in 2016 about boxes and beef and stuff and WTO and duties, all of them important, we haven't really talked at all as a community about services. And the reality is there is no good that you buy anymore without a service wrapped around it. It could be the service of marketing. So take a pig farm. You can't move a pig farm, but you can move some of the services around it. So the service of marketing the products, the service of packaging and distribution, the services of certification and health and safety around that. So services historically under the EU, for as long as we've been in it, over 40 years, have never really been harmonized across the EU. What the EU has tended to do is devolve responsibility for services to local professional organizations like the Institute of Chartered Accountants to govern how accountancy should be done across, in our case, Britain and Ireland. I mean, just to take an example, as matters stand, without any further improvements in this space, from start of 2021, so 1st of January, a British accountant will be able to sign Irish audited accounts, but an Irish accountant will not be able to sign British audited accounts. And in that situation, you have a mismatched market, you have a waste of resource, you have cost distortions for those reasons. And it's not just in accounting, it's across many professions, including in safety and healthcare. It's in engineering, it's in actuaries, it's in pension services, it's in architecture, it's in lots and lots of the things that we take for granted all around us every day. And the EU has not largely done much to harmonize the provision of services. And so that's a significant to-do list still to be on the list of people like us and many others in policy formation for the next number of years.
Wow. So huge impact there to come, kind of a tip of the iceberg there. We don't really know how that's going to pan out. I think, and that's terrible for making business decisions as well. If Mark doesn't know how much this is going to cost him, like his business is thriving now, he's, wants to expand. Obviously the UK is a huge market for companies like Mark's. But who can make a decision if they don't really know where it's going to be 6 months from now?
So that's the kind of situation that businesses have been thrust into. Thrust is probably a bit too much, because the reality is we've had 4.5 years to prepare. But I guess the reality also is that lots and lots of businesses have said, look, we're too small to prepare for every scenario. Come back to us when you know what the scenario is, and we'll adapt quickly. That doesn't work for everybody. It does work for some. And we're really busy right now with a strategy that we proposed for lots and lots of businesses that's working really well. So if you are selling whether goods or definitely services into the UK, one very easy strategy is to say, we'll open a UK office and we'll populate it on the ground there, and we'll stay inside. We won't close anything here, obviously, in Ireland, but we will open additionally inside the UK. So we're not at risk of being cut off in that way from trading as openly as ever inside the UK. And that's easier to do with services than it is with goods. And by the way, we do the exact same. We've lots and lots of UK businesses calling us every day now, including on our new Kmend platform, which we come to, talking about getting themselves a base inside the EU by opening a base inside Ireland. We're doing that with both manufacturing companies and service businesses, connecting them with like-minded businesses here who can maybe do a joint venture with them, as Mark could do with a like-minded firm in the UK. To have the resources and the route to market and the market insight, and basically, instead of thinking about losing trade, talk about growing trade with the nearest market to us, the market most like us, and a market that still has 65 million people who've got to eat, who've got to clothe themselves, who've got to go to educational establishments, got to take a holiday, got to do all the normal things of life. And that the 65 million people market of the UK can access the 450 million market of the EU when all of this is done and dusted, simply by establishing a presence on the other island as we see it.
I think that's a really interesting point as well, because even when you mentioned that those guys are calling you or you're having these conversations, I never really think of the perspective of the British in that case. It's very the Irish media, rightly so perhaps, but are very focused on how this is going to affect us. We don't really look at it from a different point of view. And I think one of the questions that I had for you there is that, like, what are the opportunities out of this? When this change is going to be someone who capitalizes on this, is it those types of joint ventures? Should Mark be reaching out to those companies saying, hey, we're doing business here, we've got the connections, we've got the contracts with these these big financial companies here that you might have worked with in London or Manchester in the past? Is that where the, if there is a silver lining, is that the main path towards that, do you think?
Big time, guys. I mean, the reality is, as I said, you can't move a pig farm, but you can move the services. Food is a special case, there's no doubt about that. And so a deal that avoids the paying of duties and tariffs and quotas on animal products is a really important deal. But it still leaves inconvenience at the point of importation and export in terms of declarations and all that stuff. So while that still arises with native produce like food, which Ireland exports 4/5 of everything that we make in food, so we need those external markets. But definitely in other trades where it's easier again, there's a huge opportunity. And business, we make the point that business people don't have any politics. If they do, we don't want to know about them. We say we're just about the business of getting more business done. We say that the only political cause we have is peace and prosperity. And the best way to peace and prosperity is to give people a job. So whether that's in the Outer Hebrides or in Cornwall or on the Ring of Kerry or up in Newton Ards, it doesn't matter. As long as business people are incentivized and enabled to follow opportunity, they will do that. It's the natural flow, and it's a very good thing. And so, it's never too late to do the smart thing as far as this goes. And whatever your business is, our operation is geared to find you somebody of like mind and say, let's put you together and you guys go off and come up with a solution from working together that you wouldn't have otherwise. And both of you and your stakeholders, your employees and your communities are better off.
Absolutely. And you touched on an interesting point that me and Mark have talked about before. Sometimes when we might be watching the news together or something, and the government are, saying that some policy is going to create X number of jobs. We always say, like, it's actually the entrepreneur or the investor that's actually going to be creating those jobs. And
that's exactly right.
Sometimes I think as well, like, I walk around whatever the town that I live in here, or I see some boarded up restaurants that aren't going to make it this time, and that is sad. But I know that there's another wave of entrepreneurs coming, waiting to invest their savings in getting this going again, and that's going to be. It's something that I don't think, in the short term anyway, we're going to be kind of lacking. And I think that we've got a good spirit there, and it's getting.
Well, I mean, the great outcome would be to stimulate even more. So you touched on it in your intro to this piece, Luke. I mean, entrepreneurs love change, because change creates opportunity. Of course, there's short-term stuff that you've got to contend with, but if you're up for that, I mean, what do you get out of bed for? It's to confront unmet need, and there's definitely unmet need. when somebody changes the rules, because people need to still exist net of the new rules. So smart operators read the rules quickly, figure out, okay, what's the right economics to navigate this new market, and they go about it. What they also need is the opportunity created by good connections, because if you are in Greystones and you don't know somebody in Sheffield, we probably do. So we can use our resources to connect you to the rest of the equation that would make great sense if you could find the right partner.
And I'd say it's become even more important now with COVID-19 and the restrictions of movement. How is it? Have you found it adapting much or evolving much, networking nowadays?
Sure thing, Mark. So, I mean, the networking space, sometimes people think it's a bit of a dark art, but it's actually very straightforward. It's what you do with your mates. You met Billy and you think that what he's talking about could be interesting to Betty, so you connect them up. They didn't know each other until you introduced them, and then they go prosper. That's all we do. And in a pre-COVID environment, a lot of that was inherently built on literally getting people into the one room. So in my offices here, we use a considerable amount of the space in these offices in pre-COVID times to literally bring people together, 50, 60, 70 people, bottle of Coke and an interesting speaker, and then go prosper, bring your cards, get to meet lots of people. It's a good process and it's hugely pleasurable, but actually it's quite inefficient because you got to take a couple of hours to kind of get to the place, get back. You got to load up on those cards, and you can only meet so many people over the course of an hour and a half or whatever it is. COVID has actually helped us all to realize that there's a much wider world out there, and whereas we couldn't get to it before, between time and money and everything else, now we're forced to connect with it online, just like this. And while it has its frustrations from time to time, it's extraordinarily efficient. And again, smart business people know that. And so they're using it really well. And they're saying, put us together online, that's just as good. So we're doing a lot of Zoom-based conference calls and gatherings and networking events. Like lots of people figuring out how to use the latest, features in Zoom, like breakout rooms and all that good stuff. And that's working really, really well. And now we can do that at scale because SMEs are kind of hard to reach. They're physically, dispersed around the highways and byways, which is wonderful. So everybody gets to have the lifestyle they want. But actually, that means that they don't get to physically meet up so much. And even on Zoom, it's not quite as straightforward. So that's why we launched our latest initiative, which is called Kmend, Kmend, as in recommend, not in Kmend. And we're working on that at the minute to get people to be fluent in it. But Kmend does what it says on the tin. It says, I know Luke. Turns out he does a pretty good job. He says to me, listen, if you like the service, would you mind recommending me to your mates? I mean, business people do that. That was kind of difficult before. You come back from a gathering, you take 2 or 3 business cards and you ping a 3-line email at its most efficient to your mates and say, I met Mark and I met Luke this morning. They're 2 good guys. My other friends, you should meet these guys. They're doing good stuff. Kmend does that all online, all automated. It basically says we work with people who are in our networks, which are obviously very trusted networks because we manage them in a trustworthy way. And we introduce them online through an artificial intelligence engine built by UCD Nova, people called Recommender X, state-of-the-art, cutting-edge artificial intelligence, which basically says the machine does the work while you're asleep. It figures out what's brilliant about you and who, therefore, the machine should recommend you to be with, to open up new opportunities of like mind, not random, not just, matching words, but understanding the nature of the kind of transactions that you want to do with some other people. And we're getting huge interest now in that platform, not least because of Brexit, for the reasons I said, where people are saying, tell us about this strategy and can you find us some equal and opposite partners that we can go forward with together. The machine is now doing that on an automated basis and it's going really well.
Perfect. And the Kmend, like recommend.
Kmend, Luke, Kmend as in recommend.
I was only having you on there, yeah, of course. Kmend. So this platform, is it live now? Or is it in beta? Is it like
yeah, it's got the really complicated name of www.kmend.com. So that's the only qualification you need to actually be good enough to go into networking is pronounced Kmend. And if you do, the machine does the work. I don't want to trivialize it. It's important that we have got a platform that can help people during COVID to be not trapped in isolation, but to say, actually, you know what? I'm liberated by this environment using the technology so that now I can do my marketing. I mean, a very good client of mine in our traditional network said, how do we business develop now? And that's a real thing, because, like, first of all, people in a lot of cases struggle to business develop anyway.
Yeah.
And then the smart ones who have mastered the art of in-person networking, that's good. They're saying, well, how do we do it in a COVID environment? So this is what Kmend is all about. It's basically opening up that world of possibly interesting connections, but filtering out the not interesteds, the time wasters. If you're in a room here, in a beautiful room with 70 people, and you're loaded up with a bottle of Coke and 70 business cards, 50% of that is wasted time, because you got to go through 7 minutes of chat before you realize, not really. So then you got to go through the art of disconnecting from that little circle and move on to the next one. Kmend saves you all that stuff. The engine does the work, connects you to people, only people who you want to be doing opportunity work with, and you take it from there.
I've set up an account already, John, for Darwin Hawkins, my recruitment company. And I have to say, yeah, it looks really well. And it took me 5 minutes, all very intuitive. So
that's great to hear.
Similar brand colors to mine
as well.
So.
We call you one of our Kmend commandos.
Okay.
Keep up the good fight.
Kmend Commando might be the name of this podcast. We like to take some sort of tidbit from the podcast. Do that. You mentioned UCD Nova. I don't really understand exactly what that is. Is that something that's like that the university uses to spin out companies, or what is the?
Well, before they get spun out, they get incubated. So it's an incubator.
Okay.
And UCD isn't the only university to have an incubator for startups, but it's a very good one. And what it looks like in practice is there would be at any time 40 to 50 very early stage companies, not just tech businesses. You got life science companies, you got professional service innovators, you got lots and lots of folks. And we came across RecommenderX at UCD a couple of years ago, and they really impressed us. And I know nothing about technology, thank God. So I gave that work to our buddies at RecommenderX, and they worked with us. So we do networks and they do technology. And together we built Kmend, as in Kmend, and it's out there in market now. The Nova faculty spins out those companies. And RecommenderX is now so successful that it's flying free and has given its seat at UCD Nova to another startup so that they can follow that path as well.
Lovely. It's so interesting how if you working with those people in university, like you mentioned, you said technology is not something that's been in your background, but if you can take your skills and apply it to a technology, you don't have to be excluded from that market. That's obviously the huge growth opportunities. Joe, I find that very interesting. And me and Mark,
there's no doubt about it. Look, all joking aside, I mean, it's not that long in Ireland since being an entrepreneur, let alone a tech entrepreneur, wasn't exactly a badge of honor. I mean, I can tell you over my too long to remember career, there was a time when an entrepreneur was somebody who couldn't get a job. When an SME was somebody who couldn't make any money, when there was no policy from government around it, was all about FDI, foreign direct investment. That's a good thing. That served as well. I think as a community, we can be really proud that we now have a huge layer and cohort, if you like, of entrepreneurs, guys like yourselves, and I count myself in it now, and that we got a chance to get out there and do something new and meet a need that people would value and appreciate and come back and do it again with us. And it's liberating, and it's a fantastic motive power in the economy and in the community now. So it's great to be part of that scene.
Absolutely. And it is interesting. I think that I guess maybe the internet, people spending a lot of time looking at in a echo chamber of things that they enjoy. So they see a lot of other entrepreneurs, they listen to podcasts about it, and then they have the confidence to go do it. Because we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs on the SharkPod. It's not all that we do. We do lifestyle design as well. So sometimes we'll have artists on and stuff, which is great.
It's really important. That's why we built our CAST business, our culture, arts, sports and tourism thing. It's really important to have art in our world.
Yeah, absolutely. And we really enjoy those ones as well. But we do talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and Mark often talk about after we talk to them, we talk about how unreasonable they were to get where they have to, or where they are now. So they would be, they'd walk into an empty cafe that was for rent and say, I think I'll start a cafe here. I've always wanted to run a cafe, when they know nothing about cafes, and it takes them 6 years to get it right. And then people just think that it was a foregone conclusion and that was going to go well. Sure. But if you went back to the beginning, you're thinking rational is the wrong word, but maybe a reasonable person would say, well, I don't have the skills for this, or it's going to be, I might risk too much here.
Well, when I retired after 40 years in banking, having messed up, fessed up, and fixed up, I decided I want to run my own business because I'd spent a lifetime helping other guys to run, other people to run their enterprises, and I loved every second of it. So I was really excited about the opportunity to run my own. I'm glad to say 6 years later, I have figured out every possible way not to run an SME, not to run a startup. There couldn't possibly be any more mistakes I could make at this stage because I've made so many. There are none left. Let's see. I mean, look, that's what being your own boss, that's what being, an innovator is all about. It is phenomenally exciting. It is, it is nerve-wracking. You can have some pretty dark times, not to be crass about it. Money can be really, really tight, and you worry when money is tight. You worry about your team. You worry about your family. You worry about, have I made a ferocious mistake? But that's all the more empowering in many ways because you just get back up on the bike again and you keep going until you get it right. And please God, we're doing some really reasonably right things now.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the 40 years that you spent in Ulster Bank.
A life sentence, Luke.
40 years. So what's like when you're working there, was it more in the sales end of things? Was it in where did you spend most of the time?
Well, I say I now live in life after debt because I used to be in the money business, but I'm still doing the same things I was doing before I left life with debt in every sense. I had the privilege of working with a fantastic community of people in Ulster Bank and an even fantasticer community of its customers all over the country and beyond, where I basically got to talk with people all day about running their businesses, about what excites them, what drives them, what scares them, what works well, about mistakes and about great adventures. And some of those businesses went on to become amazingly successful. Lots and lots of them, actually, the great majority of them, amazingly successful businesses that gave jobs to people in townlands that I couldn't pronounce. And that's among the most important things you can do with your time on earth. And so I did everything. I did cash and checks not far from here in Bagot Street in Coolock in the 70s. I did opening new accounts for people, blah blah blah. But within a couple of years, I had found my way into actually talking to actual entrepreneurs about how they were growing their businesses and supporting them with that. I ran Ulster Bank's SME business for many years. I developed the international business. I developed new lines of business for Ulster Bank to get large numbers of customers to come towards a bank that was originally really very small, and we grew its market share in the enterprise space very significantly in the space of a few years, not by flogging money, but by actually getting to know their business and developing the kind of service relationship that any of us would like to have with our bank, where it's a trusted friend. It's somebody who knows more than I know, so I'll consult them if I'm making a decision. I won't necessarily follow everything to the letter, but I will listen to. I mean, business people want to hear stuff. They want insight. They want to know what's the smart guys doing that I could follow that and all that kind of stuff. So I had an absolute pleasure and a privilege working that beat for about 40 years. And then, as I said, when I came out, I decided to do the whole thing in life after debt without all the hassle of trying to get money back and just keep on incentivizing and motivating people to grow their businesses, because that's one of the most important things you can be doing in life.
So interesting. And with all the experience that you had in the banking or in the finance world, like say if you were a 25-year-old or something like that, and you had some money to invest or something like that, where would you be putting your money from a finance point of view, investments? If knowing what you know now.
So it's a really tricky question, Luke, to be honest with you, and it's right on point right now, because there's a couple of extra factors that didn't exist even a couple of years ago, and one of those is negative interest rates. I mean, in my era, I remember ringing a guy one time to roll over a loan in the 90s. People think crises are a relatively new thing. In 1992, and his overnight interest rate was 132% per annum. So, we've been through all sorts of weird times, and it's pretty weird now when we've got the exact opposite and people are being charged to leave money in their bank or in other instruments. So the world is filled with negative interest rates. That's not a bad thing, but it's not a great thing, because it means that how do you save for your own pension in the future and stuff like that? And I got a team of 15 people, most of them pretty young people who, I don't have the resources to fund their future pension. And in the gig economy today, for lots of people, no one employer is going to be the answer to that. So we really do need to bring about a situation where people have independent control over the resources that they can hopefully put aside for an income when they can no longer work. And of course, people are living longer, and the retirement age for the state pension is rising. I've been appointed by the government to the new Government Pensions Commission, where we have a very clear mission in law and in the Constitution by next June to have delivered a way for the state and our citizens to be able to have a pension scheme that they can look forward to, a pension environment they can look forward to. I can tell you it's not easy. What I do think is that the first thing is education. I got young people working for me who would value a lot more knowledge in this space. But that's not going to be done the way it used to be done before, with a lot of, dusty old files. We need to make pension provision as easily available as an app on your phone. With the right safety and security measures. We need to make it portable right across the multiple jobs that people will have in their lives, or self-employment. We need to make it flexible so that if they got a crisis, that they don't have to wait until that it's too late. But equally that, we manage prudently around the amount of that can be accessed. And we need to make it affordable for the state to play its part in all of that. And if there was an easy answer, I probably wouldn't be on the Pensions Commission. So let's see what work we can do between now and next June.
It's really interesting as well that you mentioned that you're part of that kind of ongoing process, because I'd say that I'd be somebody who would be interested in finance, interested in making money on the side and doing different things, like you said, the gig economy and stuff like that. But even for me, I've been paying into a pension with my employer, and it was a very I'm lucky to have an employer that has quite a generous matching scheme for that, which is great. But I didn't even have access to see how much is in it. I had to go meet somebody to get some code. I had no idea. So I actually took the time in the last couple of weeks to kind of sort that out, start doing some projections. I just never really thought of too much. Maybe, like I said this to Mark, so maybe because I've got a little baby on the way, and I've never really thought more than a few years ahead. Now, something has happened to my brain where I'm thinking almost like 100-year plan. This is the kind of legacy thing that you want to be thinking about. So,
sure thing. And you're right.
I think people in their 20s think they're going to live forever, Luke. Anyway, so now you're in your 30s, you're thinking a bit more sensibly.
Yeah, maybe.
It's not too late. In fact, it's never too late to do the right thing on this. It's never too early to start. But I mean, I'm not expecting 20-year-old people to suddenly kind of feel vulnerable. I do think 30-something-year-old fathers probably should make a bit of space in their lives to think about this, because the earlier you do that, the easier it is, and you maintain a habit, and you can be flexible, and when you have a bit more, you can put more aside and things like that. But now is the right time, and certainly I would encourage anybody at that point in life to say, listen, nobody else is going to do this for me. This is for me and my loved ones, and for my loved ones around me, and my next of kin and people like that. So let's start doing this and get into the habit of it when it's a relatively modest piece of your total outgoings, rather than find too late that you got to put so much aside you can't live today.
I think it's lack of education on it for sure. Even I'm a qualified accountant, and I still get confused with pensions.
Yeah.
I think I've even done the pension exams a few years ago. So if I'm myself and Luke are kind of struggling with it and not having the inspiration to go and look.
So, we see. I think as a bunch of folks, we probably made it too complicated. There's a lot of law around it, and there's a lot of tax stuff, and there's a lot of fractions and equations and the boring stuff. But the reality is, it's not that complicated. Take what you live on today. Actually, the one thing about negative interest rates is that you can kind of discount inflation for the minute, because we used to have to worry about that. Now that, there's a second pass you can come back to about that if inflation came back. But basically to say, if you've got another, 20 years of work in you, making the kind of money you're making today, then, you've got another 20 years of not work after you at some point, and say, okay, what does that mean for the amount of money you need to have ready for the day when you haven't got that money, and spread that over the remaining years. So in some ways, forget about interest, forget about the stock market, forget about tax, and just say, how many years could you live on whatever you can afford to save now? And normally that's a pretty shocking answer. So it means you kind of need to save a bit more, or save for longer, or both. And that's what we're talking about here.
Absolutely. And I think the confrontation of that number is something that everyone needs to do, because when you actually do the math, you're like, okay, what I'm putting away now, it's likely that that's going to be, €400 a month when I'm 65 or whatever. So maybe I need to make some decisions there.
That's the thing. No, I wouldn't want to be too downhearted about it. It can be done, and One of the reasons a lot of people choose to be self-employed is because they can have control over, the amount of income. If you're working on a wage for somebody else, or if you're, in the public service and things like that, sometimes people are not able to vary their income. So that's the deal, and you got to make a plan in the context of that. One of the reasons people are drawn to running their own business is because, as they see it, and it's usually right, the harder they work, the more they can make, and that gives them a bit more to put aside for that pretty tough economics lesson that comes later in life.
Absolutely, something to take away as well. So, John, thanks very much for coming along today. We've got a bit of the lightning round here. Time really flies here on the SharkPod, as you probably know. But Mark Baker, we've got a few questions here for John.
Okay, I'll start off nice and simple, John. What apps do you use the most on your phone?
Oh, I'm an email junkie, but actually one of the great learnings in COVID has been about better tools than that, because it's just so last year in every sense, actually, in COVID. So we're gorging in my team now on the latest apps around workflow management, where everybody's working from home, or as we say, living at work. So we're junkies for Asana, Microsoft Teams, anything that makes it just easier and simpler and more fun and less discomfort, etc., to be on that. I'm a petrol head, so I have about 17 different motor industry apps. I'm a motor industry junkie, and I'm a motor vehicle junkie. So the only thing that switches me off is when I'm reading something about the motor industry. What else have I got? I got lots of other news stuff, because I am a bit of a news junkie, but I don't let that too much into my life, because most of the news content is designed to make you feel bad about life, whereas I much prefer to feel better. And I spend a lot of time, some of my life is dedicated to arts and culture. So I do a lot of work. I'm on a number of boards, great people like Fish Amble, the new play company. I'm on the board there, and I've just stepped down from the board of Music Network, which does fantastic work to expose kids to live music and families around the country. And I'm on the board of the Irish Film Institute. So I'm really enjoying using their online applications, not least in COVID. So yeah, I'm on page 5 of a 20 apps per page thingy. That keeps me going.
Nice. That's plenty. Okay, what's the best business idea you've never acted upon?
Oh, well, most of my ideas are about get rich quick ideas, but most of them have turned out to be get broke slowly ideas. So I'm probably the last guy to ask about ideas that work. Anything that has to do with a sale is a good thing, because I use the slightly heathen credo that nothing happens in life without a sale. You could be brilliant at what you know and what you do, but if you can't turn that into buying sliced pans, convert what you love doing into an exchange of currency that somebody gives you so that you can live as well as be bright and brainy and having fun with your brain. So nothing happens in life without a sale, and nothing happens to make sales happen without sellers meeting buyers. So I'm all about connecting sellers and buyers. I don't mind which side, as long as we get them meeting up, because that's how sales happen, and that's how your brain gets turned into food, and that's how somebody gets a job to help convert the process, and that's how people don't kill each other on the street, because we have peace and prosperity.
Very good. Yeah, you see lots of good products, but getting to market just seems to be tough for a lot of companies. That piece. Okay, what time do you get up at in the morning, and what time do you go to sleep?
Well, the clock goes off at 6, but I might be awake from about 5, catching up on stuff, and I generally hit the sack around about midnight.
Okay. How much money is enough money?
Well, you don't need any money, really. I mean, you could. I have a very good friend who is a clergy person. They don't have any money. They're taking a vow of poverty, and they're among the happiest people I know. So you don't need money. It's only if you want to get something that only money can buy that you need money. You don't even need an awful lot of stuff that you can buy. You do need the sliced pan from time to time, but outside of that, I think people can live on very little. And I think a growing amount of people are increasingly interested in not accumulating wealth for wealth's sake, because hint, you can't take it with you. So how much is enough to be secure and for your loved ones, your new baby coming along to be healthy and to get an education. Education is a big deal. So if we're not talking about pensions, we're not talking about education nearly enough as well, because education is the future. by definition, but it also helps us to make a better future by innovation. We talked about UCD and things like that. So, funding those things does need a reasonable allocation of the income that you accumulate. But outside of that, you don't need it. Money is only useful for what it can make happen. And the only things that you want to be making happen are security and well-being, peace and prosperity at a modest level, and enough to take a little bit of risk in life, because actually entrepreneurs don't change the world for the better without taking a bit of risk. And you can't take risk without being willing to lose a couple of bob so that you can get it back on the idea that works. So I would always leave a bit of space for that too.
Very good. Is it who you know, or is it what you know?
It's both. There's no point in knowing loads of stuff if you can't impart your braininess to somebody else. They may tell you that's not very brainy at all, but it is useful to have a network. And if you have a network, that enables you to achieve more than you can travel on your own. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a great thing. And I've nothing against people who are shy and retiring, but I encourage them to somehow overcome that enough to know that it's great on the other side when you can open a conversation with people. Because in my experience, when you put two people together, an extra thing happens out of that that wouldn't have happened if they hadn't met up. So yeah, I mean, networks are about, they're fun, they're really sociable, they help you de-stress, because if you've got a problem, there's always somebody who has a bigger version of it. So share it with somebody else so that you kind of, on average, come out a little bit better off. And usually you'll pick up an interesting idea that you hadn't thought of before, or the basis for an idea that'll occur to you because you met that person last year or last month. So yeah, we're all about knowing people to get stuff done. So combining your brain with somebody else usually amounts to more than the sum of the parts.
Very good.
Mark,
Okay.
I had a thought.
Sorry,
there.
look.
I know it's a rare thing, but I had a thought there when John was speaking about how much money is enough money. I was watching A Place in the Sun. I don't know if you guys are Channel 4 thing. One of my favorites of a Sunday afternoon, and I was thinking to myself, because how much money is enough money? There's these guys. It was the south of Spain, and they had about £250,000. It's a lot of money, and they were looking for an apartment, 2-bed apartment. I'm like, oh, they're showing them around that type of thing, and I just thought to myself, because of the sharing economy and Airbnb, I can go live in one of these places for a month for €1,000. And I went on a sun holiday for 3 weeks before, and it was a nightmare. Do you know what I mean? 3 weeks is way too long to be in a place like that. You know what I mean? So a lifetime of that isn't appealing to me. So I think the way things are going now with that type of opening up of being able to have access to things that you wouldn't be able to have access before. Like we stayed in Cannes in this beautiful apartment there. It was kind of a special occasion. We stayed there for 4 nights, and it was $1 million house, or kind of a townhouse type thing. And we were able to get a glimpse of what that would be like, and then that was enough for us. We just go home happy, so you don't have to save up $1 million and go buy a house.
Absolutely, and I mean it's kind of a version of the gig economy. It's like gig purchasing. You don't have to own it. You just want to use it. And, apps and things like that, to your point earlier on, Mark, have opened the gateway to that operationally. I mean, the one thing I would say is, you have a right to be wrong. So you need to find out stuff to find out whether what you thought you want is really what you want. And, try or buy is a kind of an interesting approach. One thing I would say about being motivated by money is it's actually no harm to be motivated by anything as long as you're motivated. I mean, the sadder version of life would be not to be much motivated. There's a lot of challenge to people's well-being and mental health right now under COVID. So I think it's really important that we keep people positively motivated, because it's very hard to make things happen unless you feel strong in yourself. You can feel afraid and feel strong at the same time. But if you don't have enough inner strength in your head, you'll find it hard to kind of take on challenges. And a part of the incentive to be strong is the material incentive that says, well, if I work harder, or if I'm more successful, or if I can try and avoid making mistakes or learn lots of things from my mistakes, then I can deliver a better life, not just for me, but for people around me. So if that's a money-based motivation, then that's a good money-based motivation as far as I'm concerned.
I like that as well. Hey, Mark, okay. One more question. If you're looking in there and you got something burning on the page there, what would you ask, John?
Okay, last one. If you could advise somebody to learn one skill, what would it be?
if I could buy somebody to learn
advise somebody.
advise somebody to learn one skill. Well, humility is always a skill to be learned, and we should be humble about our humility. But I take that as a little bit crass. I mean, I think the skill of not being afraid is a really important skill. Like our bodies need us to be afraid when we're under physical threat, but we're often afraid without having any real threat. So I think confidence, self-belief, self-strength, self-reinforcement when you're down to get back up again, strength to protect those you love around you, your family. People need us to be strong. People need people to be strong. We need to be stronger than the bad guys. There's a lot of bad stuff around. So yeah, I think self-belief and inner strength, these are the sustaining forces that can help us to deliver a better world for everybody.
Very good.
Really. And on that note, we'll wrap it up. We do have one more question, John. Would you prefer a T-shirt that looks something like this, or would you like a mug, SharkPod mug rather? What would you prefer?
Well, I'm a mug guy, as you can probably get a sense of. A lot of people think I've been a mug for a very long time. No, nothing against wildlife. In fact, I'm totally for wildlife. So I'll let you take care of the fish. Send me the mug.
Perfect. John, thanks very much for joining us on the SharkPod.
Great to work with you guys. Take care.
Thanks, John.
Ciao.
And we are